Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza and rocket fire by Palestinian militants towards southern Israel are continuing after a day of protests in the occupied West Bank. 3 Palestinians were killed in clashes with the Israeli security forces in Ramallah and nearby on Tuesday. More than 60 protesters were hurt during what the Palestinian organisers said was a general strike to condemn Israel's 9-day bombardment of Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the military campaign had severely hampered Palestinian militants. He said Hamas and Israel's enemies should see the price paid for aggression against his country.
I received
in-depth briefings about the many airstrikes we carried out against Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which suffered unforeseen blows. I've no doubt that we've set them back many years.
Diplomatic efforts to end the fighting are continuing. The EU bloc's Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell repeated calls for a ceasefire between the two sides and for a restart of the peace talks.
We need to restore a political horizon. Now the priority, the urgency is to stop violence and to implement a ceasefire. But the day after tomorrow, whenever the violence stops, we have to engage to reopen a political horizon, exploring a space for re-engagement between the parties and opening the path towards the potential relaunching of the peace process, which has been in a stalemate for too long.
Around 100 organisations involved in the shipping industry have called for a concerted effort to combat piracy in the Gulf of Guinea. Our Africa regional editor Will Ross reports.
It's not surprising that there are calls for better protection in the Gulf of Guinea. Out of 135 attacks on ships across the world last year, all but 5 were in that region. Most are carried out by gangs operating out of Nigeria. Some European naval vessels are already active, but it's not on the same scale as the deployment of warships that helped reduce piracy off the coast of Somalia a decade ago. Shipping companies also want greater effort to arrest the criminal gangs on shore. The world's biggest ship owners association says just 2 frigates with helicopters on board and 1 maritime patrol aircraft would make the Gulf of Guinea far safer.
A nurse in Britain who the Prime Minister Boris Johnson thanked by name for saving his life when he had COVID has resigned in disillusion. Jenny McGee, who's from New Zealand, said nurses were not getting the pay and respect they deserve. She told a television documentary many nurses felt the government had not led effectively during the coronavirus crisis due to indecision and mixed messages. World News from the BBC. The police officers involved in the fatal shooting of a black motorist in the US state of North Carolina last month will not face criminal charges. The deputies were attempting to serve a drug-related warrant when they shot and killed Andrew Brown outside his home. But the district attorney said Mr. Brown had posed an immediate threat to the police when he drove his car directly at them, turning it into a lethal weapon. The Japanese government has withdrawn legislation that would have tightened asylum laws after an outcry over the death of a Sri Lankan woman. The bill would have made it easier to deport failed asylum seekers. The woman died in an immigration detention centre in March after complaining for weeks of ill health. She'd been detained for overstaying her visa after going to the police to complain about domestic violence. The United Nations has appealed for more than $900 million to help Rohingya refugees who fled Myanmar for Bangladesh. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said February's coup in Myanmar had added a layer of difficulty to the humanitarian response. He said the Rohingyas were still in crisis.
It is important that the Rohingya crisis is not forgotten as action is taken, hopefully, to address the political crisis that is affecting Myanmar now. Hence the importance of this appeal, and hence my plea to help us echo the urgency of contributing substantively in support of the Bangladeshi effort.
One of Argentina's top football clubs, River Plate, are struggling to put out a team for a crucial match this week after 25 of their players tested positive for COVID. Among those infected are all 4 goalkeepers registered for the Copa Libertadores, the main South American club competition. Because of the COVID outbreak, River's managers will only have 10 players available for selection. That's the latest BBC News.